It's Sunday. You know what that means? We're about to get random, I guess. Actually, I don't know what that means. I've been really out of it. I haven't really been paying attention to the news because most of it's all like Ukraine or Israel or Cheeto Mussolini. And so none of that's really, it's not that interesting to me right now. Actually, I think the most interesting thing that I've read recently was that the Boy Scouts have changed their name to Scouts of America.
So I haven't started talking about Israel on the show, but the most interesting thing has actually happened this week, and they've basically gone rogue.
Oh yeah, no, I did read about that.
That's a huge deal, and I think it's a huge deal because they. The funny thing about the Biden administration is like they obviously are
It's an
are
election year.
it's an election year, but they're making like all the worst moves,
Yeah.
and then when they suddenly are like, if you go into Rafah offensively, we're not going to supply the weapons. It's like, you guys suddenly didn't grow a conscience. Like, I have a few theories. Like, I feel like they're running out of money, and then they're polling so terribly. Like, they just came to Detroit, which is effectively a socialist state and should be a Biden stronghold, but they're polling so terribly because he's making all the worst decisions on all the fronts. So Israel going rogue and then basically saying if the US doesn't supply weapons, then they'll fight with fingernails. It's like obviously they're the bad guys right now when you're willing to like kill innocent bystanders and say it's to kill Hamas when that's not the case. It's like if they were strictly sticking to actually Hamas, nobody would actually have a problem. But they've gone so far beyond it and killing Palestinian civilians that now that they've gone rogue and America's like, hey, we're not going to supply you weapons, and then Israel's like, hey, we don't care, we're gonna continue.
So
That is a
but
step too far.
there's a part of this that like Israel has been storied for their ability to target individuals. Like they've got like one of the most impressive anti-terrorist apparatuses that exists. Like Mossad was formed for the sole purpose, essentially, of hunting down the you know a bunch of really bad dudes, and they were able to pretty much single out those really bad dudes initially, and then it kind of now here we are where they're just bombing a whole in city. It's it sucks. It really sucks to read about this stuff every day because the part of me that's like, you know, these bastards, they basically attacked like a what might as well be a junior state of the United States, considering how much money gets pumped into Israel. But then there's the part that's like, yeah, now they're just kind of blowing the place up. And they're not even like, I mean, they send their delegates to talk at tables, but nothing happens. Of course, Hamas blows something up, or one of the other militant groups decides to blow something up, and then it derails any talks. But
Well, meanwhile,
Israel doesn't even want to listen, though.
they were bombing like Lebanon and fucking Syria and trying they just kind of had to like completely back off Iran, which is hilarious. And it's not really funny in the sense of like, haha, people are dying. It's more so like the idea that Israel was trying to start a war with Iran basically as a proxy, like you're saying, it's a subsidiary of the United States. And then once the United States is like, hey, we're not trying to do all what you're doing, then they're like, okay, we're just going to act like that Iran thing didn't happen and then focus on Rafah. And like, it, this feels like we're getting close to the end of the conflict. And the United States should have done this from the very, like, they should have never supported an offensive strike at any point and supported weapons. And so the fact that they had to pull it this late, it's better late than never, but I think we are seeing like the near end of the conflict because it's unsustainable from the Israeli side in that if they start too many conflicts with multiple people, then they're actually going to start spreading themselves too thin. And if the United States isn't resupplying them, then it's only a matter of time before they start losing gained ground. But then they've already galvanized the entire world against their cause. So effectively, anything now is going to lead to the recognition of a Palestinian state. It's almost like the United States stopping it in the UN was the only thing that has prevented it at this point. But Israel overreacting to a clear, like, when the United States overreacted to 9/11 and went into the wrong country, basically, not the right country that attacked us, that galvanized more opposition and made the conflict last longer. And that's what Israel did. But the Middle East doesn't want to keep the conflict going. So it's more so like they're just trying to get Israel to stop. And now that the United States isn't going to keep supplying weapons, it's only a matter of time before it actually winds down. So
Yeah,
I think
like
that's
every member of the economic coalition that Israel joined, like Qatar and Saudi Arabia and Egypt, and I think Jordan too. They're all like, bro, chill. We want to make money. We don't like this war crap because none of us can actually make money while war is happening. Please stop. Meanwhile, more shit blows up. It looks like Congress is going to push a bill to block Biden's pause of the arms transfer. I think the part that gets me the most is it seems like nobody can make up their mind about what they're doing. At every turn, it's like, oh, we're changing our mind because our interests guide us this direction. Oh, wait, we got to change directions again because our economic interests pull us in this way. Oh, we got to change directions again. No, we got to change gears totally because we have a bunch of allies that are like, hurting economically as a result of this.
well. And on that note, there was like a judge in Texas that blocked the reduction of credit card fees for overcharging and like overdraft fees on banks. It was supposed to be reduced to no more than $8, and
Yeah.
now some fucking like I don't understand how these people keep getting voted into office by poor white people. The idea, like, I understand that poor white people would rather burn everything down than let other people that are not white benefit at all. But to see it repeatedly in action where you're like, why are you trying to stop the reduction in fees for Americans? And they're trying to protect these businesses in the way that America has sold out its citizens to protect businesses.
Especially when our
And
entire economic system is based upon credit and the promise of future labor. Like,
right. And on top of that, then they're just giving it all to Israel and Ukraine. That's when people in the older generations don't want to talk about it, that shit frustrates the fuck out of me because they allow this shit to happen. And the idea that black people haven't gotten reparations and this money is being sent to other countries the way it is like a slap in the face to all black people. And I would urge all black people to just figure out ways to like find tax havens and not pay taxes to this shit. Cause it's like, I mean, there's legal ways to not pay taxes, and the rich people have figured that shit out. So the issue is when black people are paying taxes and our tax money is just getting funneled to other countries to wage war, but also they're just getting paid to exist. I'm like, no, I'm not going to keep funneling my money into fucking Ukraine and Israel as a person who still owed money from this thieving ass nation. Like, these fucking conniving ass colonialists are just figuring out ways to steal and steal, and they still haven't fucking paid black people yet, and they keep expecting us to pay taxes and to vote for Biden. I don't know why the fuck anybody would ever vote for Biden. This motherfucker lost the right to have abortions, and he's sending money to Israel and fucking Ukraine that needs to be spent on our infrastructure. So I don't understand why anybody would support that shit, let alone black people. And then they're like, well, why don't you vote Republican? Fuck the Republicans. I'm not even talking about that shit at that point. It's like this whole thing is so broken to the point where it just needs to kind of lose its control over geopolitics, because I think the problem with the United States trying to be the world police is you have these fucking white people that would literally rather burn shit down. They don't care about the environment. They don't care about fucking ice caps melting. All they care about is being number one in some fucking imaginary race that is this parasitic form of like association called nationalism that is a bane upon humanity, and they're trying to perpetuate nationalism in the worst way to keep America on top of that stupid fucking nationalist race, where people, I think, are with the internet becoming extra national. And it's way more difficult when your digital tribe exists all over the world to put this stupid fucking flag above anything else. And I see the reinforcement of nationalism in places where it doesn't make sense anymore. Like, I don't think it ever made sense, but increasingly, like if you look at a combat sport where you're like a boxing match or a mixed martial artist, this is an individual fighting another individual. Why are they getting their fucking national flag displayed before they fight, as if this has something to do with nations? And then you get this notion of like,
oh, that's because Conor McGregor was fighting for all Irish dudes who were like, mad about
supposedly,
something. Apparently.
Supposedly. That's the idea.
It's so absurd.
It's really absurd. It's really absurd. And increasingly, like, every time I see a combat sport and they have the national flag, I'm like, what are we doing? What's going on here? Like, why? And again, I aesthetically and chronologically and historically understand what's actually going on. I don't mean that in the sense of like, why is this happening? I mean that the notion of this happening in 2024 and becoming more prevalent in combat sports, where it's almost like you'll see people walking out with their flags or like getting flags banned, especially when the Russian Ukraine conflict started. They started trying to make it seem like Russian people who were fighting weren't Russian, and they'd be like fighting out of Chicago, by way of Colorado, and then it'd be some super Russian ass name, and you're like, why aren't they showing this guy's flag, but they got this USA flag on the other side? And they would show like just a gray globe that doesn't have any continents on it. And it's like Russians were erased out of mixed martial arts. I don't know. I wasn't watching boxing that hard, but for at least 2 or 3 years, Russians got like erased out of mixed martial arts in a way where it's obvious when you're in a conflict, or when there's a real world conflict happening between Russians and Ukrainians, having a Russian and Ukrainian fight in an octagon while actual people are dying isn't going to look really good. So they were trying to avoid having things like that happen by just removing the Russian flag altogether. But this was after this was they only had to do that because they were trying to make anybody who was Eastern European under the Russian flag at that point. Like it's like if you're in a Russian Federation uh like territory, but you're not in necessarily Russia proper, they were going to put the Russian flag for you. So they played into it and then tried to downplay it, and now are stuck in this weird place where it's like, is it okay to bring the Russian flag back yet? Is the conflict in Ukraine over? And because there's so much Nazism in Ukraine, it's like some organizations are starting to be hesitant about putting the Ukrainian flag out there. Not all, like you won't see it everywhere, but increasingly I think organizations are more and more hesitant to do that Slava Ukraine thing because there's just too much Nazism to deny at this point. They at first it was a rumor, and at first it was like, oh, it's just a few of them, but then it's like, no, there's a shitload of Nazis in Ukraine. So I don't even know. I think Americans realized they couldn't figure out, even if they did some research, it would be too difficult to figure out whose side to actually come down on in Ukraine. So they just kind of started ignoring it and are trying it, like hoping it goes away just on its own. And I don't think they're going to tune back in. And same thing starting to happen with Israel. So it's like, I don't know, because graduations just happen and the college campuses aren't going to be full of people. They're not going to be hotbeds for protests. So we're going to see if all these protests get that, if that protest energy gets transferred to Capitol buildings, which it very well may. And if that happens and it goes into an election year, Trump could go to jail. Biden might die. He might die at any second. Let's just keep that shit real. Like, we're talking a walking corpse at this point. And I think it's like they're making calculations in case Kamala has to take over. But it's every time I see Biden for more than 5 minutes at a time on video where it's not edited, that shit's like, oh my God, this is a fucking corpse, man. This is not a real person. And I know obviously his heart's beating and I know he's medically alive, but that's like, it looks like he's like rotting in real time. So I'm looking at this guy and looking at this person who's so fucking out of touch with the young people, and then Hillary Clinton comes along and is like, "Oh, these young kids don't know what they're talking about when they're protesting," and I'm like, "Oh, these motherfuckers are like, it's like they're trying to lose the race,
I mean,
but they're just so disconnected."
As of February 28th, he has a new but stable under treatment for sleep apnea. Has AFib, but it's stable. Hyperlipidemia is stable. Gastroesophageal reflex is stable. Seasonal allergies are stable.
Hold on. Sleep apnea means he's just almost dying every night. He's almost just stopping breathing every night. So that's a huge fucking deal.
What else? Stiffened gait, moderate to severe degenerative osteoarthritic change, spondyloidosis, stable. Sensory peripheral neuropathy of feet, stable. Skin cancer surveillance, routine. I haven't found anything, apparently. Optometry surveillance, routine. Dental surveillance, routine. That means everything's normal. Let's see, what else? He's only on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 six medications for allergies. But let's see what else. The summary from physician to the president of the White House, Kevin C. O'Connor, DOFAAFP. This patient's current medical considerations are detailed as above and remain stable and well controlled. They include obstructive sleep apnea, AFib with normal ventricular response, lipidemia, gastroesophageal reflux. So he has heartburn, seasonal allergies, spinal arthritis, and sensory peripheral neuropathy of the feet, nummy feet. Takes 3 common prescription medications,
which is
3 over-the-counter medications.
numb feet is like a sign of multiple problems, or in the sense of it could be one of, or it could be a combination of things. But he could be pre-diabetic. He could be just have like poor circulation. That's like, neither one of those is a good thing. But
also 81.
exactly. Which means also his body could just be dying.
Well, it says here is during his physical exam. Physical exam is essentially unchanged from baseline. So whatever, he's been on this trend for a while now.
His baseline would have been 4 years ago.
Yeah.
So that's what, 77?
Yeah.
That's not a good baseline to be like, oh, this health. When's the last time somebody was like, this healthy ass 77-year-old?
Let's see. Head, ears, nose, throat are normal. No enlarged lymph nodes or goiter. Lungs are clear. Heart demonstrates regular pulse and characteristically irregular rhythm. What the? Hold on. Irregular rhythm.
Yeah, that's not good.
What does that even? What's that supposed to even mean? I thought
it means that.
But he has no significant murmurs, gallops, or rubs. Abdomen is soft, non-distended. I still don't. Okay. Irregular. There's got to be a better way to say that, like in medical terms.
No, that's a very specific thing that they're saying in medical terms, because if it was regularly irregular, then it would be on a period. But irregularly irregular means
it just happens.
They can't predict when it happens, and there's no way to tell, which is worse than regularly irregular. And that's where, and the only reason I even know about this is because my dad just had to get a Watchman, which is not the same as a pacemaker, but it's like, if you have heart rate problems, sometimes they'll do a pacemaker and sometimes they'll do a Watchman, which is like, one regulates it and one monitors while not necessarily regulating. And if they didn't do the surgery, it's because they didn't want to do it while he's in the president or about to go into presidency and is going to have to recover for 6 weeks from getting this pacemaker or Watchman put in. And that's not going to look good. And
yeah, it says here
nobody's going to want to reelect him.
So it says here, mildly decreased heat-cold sensation in both feet. Extremities have full range of motion, with noted tightness of hamstrings and calves. Yeah, but you get that from sitting too much. No clubbing.
Yeah, but you also get that if your heart's failing.
Yeah, that's true.
It sounds like his heart's failing because
81.
he's fucking 81.
He's 81.
In the most high stress job in the fucking country. So I'm not, when you got a failing heart in the most high stress position, I'm not, like I said, I'm not sure he's going to make it. I mean, he might. He probably will, because he's got the best fucking doctors at this point.
I'm not getting the vibe that they're saying anything's really wrong with him. It's more like he's just old.
They can't say anything's wrong with him, bro. They can't put that shit. They have to use the most technical jargon to make it seem like everything is okay. But irregularly,
if he was like our age, I'd be like, man, this dude's fucked up. They're probably gonna die. But this is an 81-year-old dude. They definitely are gonna die.
Anybody else was in that position, do you know how many different surgeries they'd be having? But they can't do that because then he wouldn't be reelectable. If this motherfucker had to get as many surgeries as he needs to serve, like, he's gonna get those surgeries if he makes it out of office, he's gonna get those surgeries, and we're probably not gonna hear about it. He's just gonna go away for like 8 weeks, and he's gonna reemerge, and they're gonna be like, "What happened?" And they won't release any of it because it's gonna be like a private it's not gonna happen at a public hospital. So that's where I'm like, knowing damn well the way that they gave fucking Dick Cheney a fake heart for years, it's like they can keep these people's blood pumping without a heart. Like at that point, like it's not
Did
even
you just
that's not
did
even
you just did you
conspiracy
just I know, but
theory.
did you just tell a really roundabout Dick Cheney's heartless joke?
I mean, I feel like that one's beating a dead Dick Cheney horse.
Yeah, but still.
Like, but I think it's a good reminder that yeah, this motherfucker was walking around without a functioning heart for almost a decade.
Maybe we do need to get the president on the Coca-Cola Big Mac diet. Jesus.
I guess the header's still up. We
Oh
got
yeah.
comments.
Yeah,
Yeah, Hattie saying
my
at that
attempt at
age, sleep
automating this
apnea.
crap failed. Damn it. My bad. I attempted to automate the intro screen thing, but it didn't work apparently. Was not paying attention. You know, you said something earlier about like nationalism and people taking like getting way too into that stuff. I read something the other day about Candida auris, which is like a super drug resistant fungus, and they first identified it in like Southeast Asia, India, places that were are have warm, wet climates, and that was like in like 2010 or so. But they believed that it first emerged in the early 90s, but it just wasn't a organism of interest because it was so uncommon. But they started finding in people's ears, and then it started appearing in all over the place in hospitals because it colonizes flesh, and then it started killing people who are immunocompromised. So here's this thing that is expanding its area because it's getting hotter and it's staying warmer and wetter longer, and it doesn't care where anyone's from. It's going to go out and colonize their flesh, and it's going to spread into the walls. Apparently, it stays on surfaces, like in hospitals where they've cleaned it with all their chemicals, and it stays on these surfaces for days after they've cleaned it, and it's and still viable to spread. Like this is the kind of thing that they got to go in with cleansing fire to kill, and that doesn't actually guarantee that it could kill it. And since a significant portion of fungal DNA is shared with humans, we can't just target it directly because it could absolutely kill the human.
Yeah, it's shit like that where I think we're like 40% bacteria and like 60% human DNA, or it may be like closer to 50,
Oh, we've got a bunch of
50, 40.
we got a bunch of DNA that came from viruses that we've written into our code, our
No,
DNA.
no, no, just straight up like a human being, like the way that we exist is because we carry a lot of bacteria in
Oh
our
yeah,
gut, and like because our because of the makeup of our body at any given moment, like it's bacteria that's not carrying our DNA, that's like actual bacteria that exists within our body as like part of our biome, but it's also it has to be kept in balance or else something like a form of candida can take over.
yeah.
And I get it with like my tongue ever so often. It's like if I don't if it's weird if I like breathe with my mouth open when I'm sleeping, or like it's like if it's almost like if my mouth gets too dried out, then it's susceptible to a fungal overgrowth for whatever reason, because it's like the resistance to bacteria and to fungus is like lowered. Um,
Oh yeah, because all the enzymes that travel in our saliva aren't present to like say stay back.
and sometimes it'll be like a beer that triggers it, or something will trigger it, where because alcohol converts to sugar, you'll get too much sugar in your blood, and then the overgrowth will happen because of high blood sugar. And it's like I try to monitor things like that, and it's just if it like cascades once it's out of control, then it's like hard to rein in. But
Oh yeah.
knowing that I, that's like it's like I think they call it thrush. Um, like knowing how easy that can happen if my diet gets out of whack, when there's something like this where you're already talking about a body of people who already have bad diets, this type of thing can quickly spread. But I also think people like us who don't eat terrible food are not going to have as much of a problem. And I think it's like when you get
I
a
was wrong.
certain
It can
type
stay on
of,
surface for weeks.
but also how often are people showering? Because I'm seeing shit where you'll see stories like, oh, it's okay not to shower multiple, like you don't have to shower for multiple days in a row. And I'm like, what is wrong with white people? Why do they think that shit's okay? It's like if you take a shit, you need to shower at some point
Yeah.
within the next few hours. So it's like I don't it's not even just about smelling bad. If you have a regular diet, you're gonna shit every day.
I,
And
I
if you shit, you need to take a fucking shower. Period.
I think there's like a huge gap in the knowledge base for the average person when it comes to microbiology and microorganisms and how these things, the role these things play in our existence, and how when, as you've mentioned, when they get out of control, it can be really bad. So like one of the things that this C. auris does is it starts in the ear, but then it colonizes the skin, and then it gets into the blood through scrapes or cuts or nicks, or sometimes it goes in through the nose, through the mouth, and or it can go in through your fingernails. It just needs to get into the blood, but then it causes like an array of like downstream things like fungal pneumonia, and when it gets into the brain, then that person's pretty much, like they're FCAC'd at that point, because it's in the brain. You can't. There are no
Like
chemicals that.
RFK with that brainworm.
Yeah, like there are no chemicals that can get in there and kill that stuff without completely damaging the brain. And so it's the fungus isn't going to care if somebody's from Russia or Ukraine or the United States or Israel or Qatar or anywhere. It appeared in New Jersey, of all places.
Real quick, I've started to hear people saying Qatar like that. Like, do you know where that came from?
Qatar or Qatar?
It's Qatar.
I don't know. I heard it from
But
when I was working
I
at Right Res.
no, it's definitely not Qatar. It's definitely not Qatar. Which is where I'm like, if I wouldn't say anything if I hadn't heard it. Like it started recently. It only started in like the last 6 months, where I'm like, what happened? Where did this start spreading from? Because it almost feels like intentional, like someone is trying to disrupt their perception, and they're like, we're gonna pronounce Qatar wrong on purpose, and then it spreads where it's like it definitely wasn't you, because I kept hearing it on this Dr. Berg show. Like he gets people calling in from there, and his announcer will say Qatar, or some people say Qatar, and I'm like, who says that? Who's the person saying this now? Because it's not
The only
people from
voices, the
there.
only news voices that I hear regularly are like NPR, and occasionally when CNN dupes me into thinking that I'm reading an article, but they start playing a video, and then MSNBC when the same thing happens, and CNBC does it to me too when I click on a link thinking I'm going to read something about some business, and then it's a video. R. Where does Cutter come from then?
I don't, and that's why I'm like, that's where I was trying to figure out if you'd heard it explicitly somewhere where I'm like, I know it came from somewhere because it only happened. I only started hearing it in the last 6 months being pronounced that way, but everybody's pronouncing it wrong the same way, which is where I'm like, this is coming from somewhere. Like, and I thought it was weird of all ways to pronounce it. Cutter is like, or Cotter, that doesn't, I don't know why any American would look at that word and pronounce it that way. Like, even if I didn't know how to properly pronounce it, I was always pronouncing it Qatar before I was like looking it up to make sure. But that's where I'm like, I don't know. That's where okay.
Whoa, here's a guy who says he is Mr. IQ I love Qatar.net, and his says it's like a QITER, Qatar. I think there's like a bunch of different ways to pronounce it on the internet, and knowing what I've experienced in the last 2 months with I know that I
No,
can't
no, no,
believe
no, no,
this
no,
shit
no, no.
now.
There's not a bunch of different ways to pronounce it on the internet. Let me put that into proper. There's different ways it's going to be pronounced in different languages. In English, it should only be pronounced one way, and that's the proper way because we only have the proper way to say it from like our framing, which is why when this is happening in a way where I'm like, it feels intentionally disruptive to information because there's like, if you, okay, you know when you hear somebody say nuclear and you're like, I'm gonna let that slide. I'm not gonna assume this person's a fucking idiot because people have been mispronouncing that. Like, if somebody knows of Qatar, you're not gonna assume they're an idiot if they pronounce it Qatar, and you're like, you're gonna question, oh, have I been pronouncing it wrong the whole way? If you've been pronouncing it Qatar and then you hear somebody that you know isn't not an idiot say Qatar, instead of like questioning like, oh, I think they're pronouncing it wrong, you're gonna start questioning yourself. And
So
that's how
it looks
the
like
Qatar spreads.
we don't have these there's like some consonants in Arabic that don't exist in
Yes, of
English.
course, of course,
And
of
so
course,
they're saying that
of
it's
course.
actually closer to guitar.
Yes, exactly, exactly.
The
It's
first
like
consonant is more of
apostrophe.
a G than a hard C.
Exactly.
So
Exactly. So it's not cutter. It's not. It's more like Qatar, like guitar. So
huh.
even when you take out the consonant or the vowel, it's not cutter. It's Qatar. Like, or
Oh,
yeah.
a
So
deep-throated K or hardish G sound, depending on the dialect, and then de-emphasizing the vowel. So the A isn't even an A. And then the T
but
is a guttural
they
T. Oh
yeah,
wow, this
but
is
they
a
do that
cool.
to pronounce like the place where there's no explicit vowel. When it's translated to English, they pick one. What some it when it becomes a cognate, one gets picked and it becomes the
Yeah.
accepted, which is why when you're pronouncing it in English, it's gonna be Qatar. If you're gonna go Arabic, then it's not even gonna be, it's definitely not gonna be Qatar.
No.
So that's where I mean, like, or any variation on that dialect, it's not even still not gonna be Qatar. It's gonna be closer to Qatar or Qatar than Qatar. Like, because of what you're identifying. So that's why when it spreads uniformly wrong, it feels like it's coming from one place and everybody's accepting that instead of verifying what it properly is. Because that's where I'm like, even when I hear the person saying it, he's like acknowledging the proper saying, but then saying like as other people saying, I'm like, but who's saying this? It's like he's inventing a fictional person to then pass off the mispronunciation on, and then planting the mispronunciation. And it's like, it seems innocuous, but when information is already in a state of disarray, little things like people not being able to agree on pronunciations are where information starts to diverge. And that's where something like nuclear can become like a flag eventually. Once people like identify a trigger word that's mispronounced constantly, they'll accept it, but it'll trigger certain things. Like, I know I don't know if everyone knows how to properly pronounce nuclear, but when someone says nuclear, it's like a red flag that never goes away, that I put on that person, like, noted, this person can't pronounce nuclear correctly. And I don't know why they've never bothered to look and see the order of the words and just keep saying, like, it's one thing if you don't know how to pronounce it, but to keep pronouncing a word that you don't know how to pronounce and are very confident in that, that to me is like a weird.
I think I think most of the people who say, well, I don't actually encounter many people who say nuclear. Um, so I generally
No, not
assume
in
that
real life. I don't
I
encounter
know,
it in
and
real
the only time I ever
life.
hear it, it's always like a preamble to a joke.
I think it's always in media that I see them, or I'm like, okay, I'm never watching this person again. Like,
The one that I do hear still, thank you GW, is irregardless, and I'm pretty sure that's become accepted as a word now.
and that's what happens is like,
Oh yeah.
if someone is powerful enough, it happened with Ibiza. Like, I think it was a king, or it was a king or a prince or somebody had
Oh,
a
it
list.
was it was that's why we speak in Spain. They speak Castilian Spanish with the lisp.
Right. But it's like, again, it's like if somebody has enough power and mispronounces it, then people are just going to have to go along with it out of whatever, whether it's respect or fear. They don't really necessarily have a choice, which is also where I'm like, that feels like that this feels like where that's coming from. Like, if Joe Rogan mispronounced it and his minions never checked and then they started mispronouncing it, then a bunch of people who listened to those people started mispronouncing it, and then suddenly like millions of people are saying things incorrectly, then suddenly it's okay to say that. Like you said, irregardless, people, when someone says irregardless, I don't necessarily fault them because it became parlance. But if they say multiple things wrong, like irregardless, and then nuclear, it's hard to even pronounce it wrong.
Nuclear.
Um, or fucking, what's it called? Oh man, it's so hard for me to remember when people say be Pacific,
Be
and they
Pacific.
want you to be more Pacific.
Wait, does that mean be cool, be chill, go get some sun and catch some
No,
waves?
no, it means get
Is it?
more accurate details. You see what I'm
But the Pacific is a giant sea of turbulent cold water that
No,
has.
no. Maybe I need to be more specific in what I'm talking about. And that's like, or when somebody says some shit like that, it's like one red flag doesn't necessarily mean they're an idiot. But when I get to like two or three, I'm like, I can't take anything this person says seriously. And that's conditioning, and I accept that it's not necessarily someone's fault or responsibility to speak everything in accordance to the way I'm anticipating it being said. So that's why I tend to not, if you if you would have only said Qatar one time, or said the name, I wouldn't have like said anything. But then I'm like, okay, for whatever reason, this is coming up multiple times in conversation, and that's where I'm like, more American people are talking about Qatar. Why? There's just there's just more discussion of Qatar for
You know,
whatever
I
reason.
think it's the same thing that happened with Iraq. Like during Gulf War II, a lot of people were calling it Iraq
Or Iran,
or
yeah,
Iran.
it's the same.
It's the same.
But
It's similar,
but
but
these are countries that we're at war with. So yeah, we're not.
yeah, we're
They're
not
not
at
going to
war
pronounce their
with
name correctly.
Qatar.
I mean, not directly, but economically. That's the problem with nationalism. We're economically at war with everybody, even our fucking allies. So yeah, there's all this shit where I don't look at it. I can't look at it as innocuous. It's like, when did Qatar start getting in our news so frequently? You know what I mean? But it happened at some point. It happened, and it's like it's not even in the background. It's like on the periphery of a lot of news stories where things we know things happen there. We know about it, but like if somebody asks you to pick pick out the difference between Qatar and Dubai, and you didn't have the Burj Khalifa in the picture, could you do it?
If you didn't have, if Dubai didn't have the any of its buildings, you wouldn't be able
Or
to tell.
you know what I mean? Yeah. So that's what I'm like.
I mean, could you tell it was Dubai if they took away all the supercars?
And so that's where I'm like,
I mean, that's literally the only reason I know I'm looking at a picture of Dubai, because the police cars are Lamborghinis or Teslas or Ferraris or whatever supercar that they've you know taken from whoever was breaking the law and turned it into a police car. It's the only reason that I can tell, actually, because you never actually see a picture of the Burj in the background, because no camera angles are going to be big enough to get it without and get the subject in the frame in like Dubai proper. You'd have to be outside of the city to take a picture of the Burj.
it's like Doha and fucking Dubai look.
The same.
Yeah, and that's where I'm like, I think these places are being functionally conflated in America. Like, why?
I mean, obviously they're the same place. They're only like a couple 100 kilometers away from each other.
It's like, I swear, it's like in the last 2 years.
695 kilometers, like by road. By plane, it's 393 kilometers if you go over the water. I mean, obviously that's the same place. It's only like an hour and a half away by plane, or 6 and 7 hours by car. It's clearly the same place. It takes less time to get from Bloomington to Chicago. I can get to your house from where I am if I leave right now in less time it takes to drive from Doha to Dubai. Like that's like driving from Chicago to Louisville. Those places are the same, of course. They both speak English.
Well, man, and I think this is where it's like,
I'm
It's
I'm
such
being
a
an ass. I really am. I'm sorry.
well, it's such a disproportionate concentration of money that it's hard to fathom. Like, there's only two 2.6 million people in Qatar. There's
Total in the
three,
like really?
yeah, and then there's 3.3 million people in Dubai. So we're talking about between those two places, like obviously we're not going to talk about all of Saudi Arabia, but if we're just talking about those two places, that's like fewer people than what, New York?
Yeah. I think you just said something like just around 6 million people.
New York City is fucking 8 million. So that's less than the population of New York City. And between those two places, the amount of money that they have is like it's not even going to be fathomable for the percentage of wealth that, and it's even obviously an even smaller population among those people that are actually controlling the majority of it, but it's like the way that they are now influencing our news and our government, it totally feels like our shit's running out of money. And the I don't have you seen Riyadh season?
I have not.
So they're buying up all combat sports basically. And when I say all combat sports, I mean like boxing, mixed martial arts, fucking professional wrestling. Like they're buying up all the combat sports. And it's like I think they realize their oil is running, like the oil isn't going to be there forever, and it's not like they're running out now, but they're trying to get other prospects to make their economy viable besides just energy, and to see the way that they're just scooping up combat sports. It's like the way that Japanese and Chinese scooped up real estate in
So over the last 20
America in the
years,
90s.
out of the $13 billion in funding that U.S. education institutions have received from foreign sources, Qatar has contributed 4.7 billion of it. They've contributed over a third of foreign funding to U.S. institutions, education institutions. That's a lot.
We we wouldn't have to take it if we didn't need it.
Oh, oh, that hurts.
You know? If we didn't need it, we wouldn't have to take it.
I wonder how much is UAE invested? Oh wow,
Just
UAE
buying
is
up whole industries.
yeah. UAE manages over $1 trillion in investments abroad, and of that, $22.7 billion in direct foreign investments come into the United States. It looks like over $1 trillion in the United States. What the crap?
We talked about the line on the show, right?
Oh yeah, they canceled
No.
that crap.
Well, they didn't cancel it. Now
They're
they're
gonna
trying to
shorten
push
it.
forward. No, they were straight up killing they gave the order to allow killing of native tribes
What?
to move them out of the way. Yeah.
Oh, I did not
So
what I read was that
yeah,
they decided that the whatever 100 miles of it was too much, and they were going to reduce it down to like a 10 mile line.
that was before it came out that they, because okay, what they're also not really showing in the West is there are a bunch of protesters who are trying to block the progress of the line on um, ecosystem grounds.
Ordered to kill
And
any indigenous people who refuse to leave their homes to make way for
yeah,
construction of the line.
and that just came out. So I was like, I think we talked.
He
So it's
told the
like,
BBC this 4 days ago. Holy shit.
yeah, it only just came out. So I think
Whoa.
there's more problems with that than they want to let on, which is why Jamal Khashoggi got fucking killed. And they're trying to make it seem like everything, don't look over here, everything's cool, the line's cool, everything's cool. Meanwhile, they're actually literally killing people to try to get this thing built before people realize how much of a clusterfuck it is. And so there's something going on with like liquidity worldwide to the point that they're just willing to start offing people.
Yeah, it looks like they've been displacing people since 2022. 21. 21. Okay. February of 21. This is 2020. Okay, so they've been doing this for years now.
And they got halted because of protests, and the protests held them up for I think 6 months. And so
That
once
must have
they
been
got
why they said
six,
they weren't doing it anymore.
I mean, 6 months behind on a build like that is so much money
Yeah, all of those
because
machines
you have
just
to
sitting
keep the
there.
contract. Yeah. So they have to pay for the shit. And so the protests actually did impact their bottom line in a way that they're also now trying to make it seem like it didn't, because that's a loss. You can't be a fucking Saudi king and lose to some protesters like that.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it says they scaled back their ambitions a little bit, it looks like. That was and that was a few weeks ago, April 17. Makes this article. Let's see if there's anything about tribal concerns. Okay, it's mentioned one time. In October 2022, government had issued death sentence and lengthy prison sentences to 6 members of the How Waitat tribe, which has long inhabited the proposed site, for resisting their eviction. Huh. So this stuff's coming out.
Yeah, it's coming out slowly but surely. Um,
It'll be
but I
interesting
think
to
that's
see if they
also,
force this thing through despite having killed people to take the land. I wonder how the people who are going to live there are going to feel about it. Will they even care?
well, they're having a hard time filling it up. I think there's only 10,000 people
That's not
that are
enough.
currently resident. No, they're supposed to have
They need the whole population of Saudi
like a
Arabia to
million.
live there. 9
Well,
million citizens at
yeah,
capacity, but
and
they're gonna cut its capacity to less than 300,000. Even at 300,000, that's like, so they're gonna find the 300,000 most like ethically unchallenged people, or ethically, yeah, morally flexible people they can find to live there. Sounds about right.
yeah, the downgrade is major.
How are
I
they?
think they're
What are they even going to produce in this giant? It's like a skyscraper laying on the ground, is what it really is. It's a skyscraper built sideways.
but it's also as tall as a skyscraper.
Yeah, 1,600 feet is the proposed. You know, my question is, when there's a fire in that thing, and there probably will be several over the course of its life, what's going to happen to people? Are they just going to run sideways until they get away? How are they going to get out of this thing? Where would they even go?
Well, because of the way it's built, at any given moment, everyone is always the farthest away they could be from anything. So if there's a fire, because it's in a line, everybody's always going to be the farthest from the fire possible.
Or
that
they're going to
also
be as
that
close to it as they can be.
No, that also applies when you're talking about working. So it's like if you're trying to get to work, you're always as far as the farthest possible away, unless you're like literally on your way to it. Because it's like
It's like a city
this,
block, like a super block wide, and then it's supposed to be like, miles and miles long. This is just like a bad idea.
yeah, the straight line is quite possibly the most terrible logistic design for transportation. And then the idea was like, oh, they're gonna have
They're only going to make it 1.5 miles long.
well, but then there's gonna be train. There was gonna meant to be a train running along, but then it would have to stop. So it was just meant to be some high speed acceleration and immediate stopping, high speed acceleration and stopping. So it's like,
Oh, Vomit Express.
yeah, the plan had so many terrible points where if you just think about it for a second, you're like, oh, well, this isn't gonna work. Like if somebody needs to get from one side to the other,
They got to go
then
all
they'd
the way
have to
around or through.
all the way through. Yeah. So
Oh, good.
and if you're like on the edge and you need to get to the middle, you still have to go all the way through. You have to get all the way through that
So
hatch.
I wonder if there's no concern for any kind of natural wildlife that wants to go from one that used to be able to go across that space to get to, like, wherever they need to go, right? That doesn't matter.
I mean, I think this is the one place where
That doesn't happen.
yeah, there's not a ton of natural wildlife using that for crossings. This isn't like the Serengeti where you're gonna get like, you know, billions and billions of things crossing to get to other side like every year. At least in this the part that they're at now, but I think that was partially where like the areas along it were inhabited. So I think that's where the protests were happening in the places where they're like, hey, you can't just kick these people out because this place is actually inhabited in like one of the most difficult to inhabit places on the planet. People actually were able to inhabit. So um yeah, it seems like there is definitely a battle of capital happening. And I think time is winning. I don't even know if this is like sides winning so much as eventually when you have a bunch of people moving money around and trying to use pump and dump schemes to, if it's whether it's like Tesla or SpaceX or um, Nike or whatever company that is hot and then, they sort of plateau and then they become just a staple to get these exaggerated accumulations of wealth. They need to keep having these mass injections of product or resource, and we're getting to the end of that where there's not been any, like, I think what like the cobalt mining maybe, or lithium mining. I don't know what one would call the most recent massive injection of national or of natural resources into the economy is, but we haven't really had another one since lithium and cobalt as far as like resources. And I think that's where you get
Isn't there like a
the
sulfur
Saudis.
deposit found in Scandinavia that's good for the next 200 years for normal industrial applications, but only like 50 years if we use it for batteries or something like that.
I mean, but we weren't like running out of sulfur
No,
though,
I
right?
know. It's one of the most abundant minerals on Earth.
Well, okay. On that note, okay, let's say somebody makes an advance in desalinization or
Yeah, it
something
was in
that's like
Norway.
um opens up. Water is one of the most needed and most restricted resources. So if something happens that opens that up, there's the potential to have like a new growth in our economy. But I think what we've been experiencing is all this shrinking because the last 30 years has been paper growth and digital growth, but not actual growth in the form of discovering some new resource into the economy. And I think that's why it's like you got the Saudis investing in combat sports. Like it when the Saudi electric supercar experiments have kind of failed because we didn't really need any more supercars. I think cars are as super as they needed to be, and that's why we're not really hearing about any Saudi um, supercar companies. We are hearing about uh, BYD and like electric car companies that are challenging global hegemony by introducing electric hybrids, which is something that American companies just haven't been doing. So now you have the prospect of really cool electric cars getting an excessive tax because our cars just can't compete because partially because of fucking goddamn uh fake Tony Stark, Elon Musk dominating the American market and then pushing this singular line of thought as to how to approach electric vehicles, and then China just coming in and be like, what if you do it this way? And making it much more practical as a transition, because I think it's like Americans just don't do hard transitions. They need soft transitions, and a hybrid electric vehicle that you can still put gasoline in is the exact type of soft transitions that Americans need, where they're trying to, it's like they're rejecting electric vehicles. So I don't know, man. I see this. Sorry, go ahead.
I love hybrids. I love the idea of a range extended electric motor powered vehicle. There's no literature out there to convince me that like a internal combustion only power plant is the future. When electric motors are able to deliver power like immediately and with very low heat output, they just need energy. My big dilemma right now though is that the batteries that are being made aren't actually being recycled. They're just being reclaimed and stored until they have a solution to reclaim the material, and then I don't know, you reutilize spent battery material, so recondition it somehow. Everything that I've read leads me to the same kind of warnings that like these batteries are just being stored in containers in the desert, and sometimes they explode because batteries are batteries. But until they figure that storage problem out, we have gasoline, and which has or even any of these petrochemicals that already exist that have a complete like supply and delivery chain that's fully realized. That stuff still has like an incredible stored energy potential for a given volume, much better than any battery right now. And I am perfectly fine utilizing anything that gets to that point in the end when we have stable energy generation, storage, and delivery that doesn't involve petrochemicals. I'm I to get there, if we have to use this stuff some more, that's okay. And then there's the part of me that's concerned that if we take the the gas engine out of the car right away, just like wholesale, like nope, it's gone like that. Um, there's a really big portion of the industry, not the industry, of the workforce that's going to be kind of left high and dry because, as you've said, hard transitions, people don't really want to do those things. But the soft transition, you know, with a range extended hybrid or a hybrid power plant or a range extended electric vehicle, whatever they want to call it, that is just another step on the way to the future. And sometimes these things need to take a little bit more time. Like Honda, their CEO just said that he's rejecting like the whole government mandated electric vehicle thing because it's a lie. And part of that is they don't have battery technology and their electric motors kind of suck, and their one electric vehicle didn't do very well in the United States. And then Toyota's like, yeah, we're still pushing forward with hybrid vehicles because turns out Japan can't produce enough electricity for all of their electric vehicle needs if everyone had an electric vehicle. And Japan has nuclear power plants. There are so many things that need to be there to make an all electric vehicle infrastructure work. And there is a roadmap to it, but there are so many obstacles, and those things kind of have to be taken down like one at a time. I don't think this is the kind of thing that gets steamrolled into existence. It's not like a war effort. We've been trying to convince people to go to war on climate change for all of my life, and the best we can get people to do is maybe not run their air conditioners hard on like full freezer all the time, or put on a sweater or a hoodie in winter instead of turning the heat up, or let's recycle, and only to find out that recycling is a sham.
Well, it sucks because you want people to change their behavior, and then you're like, how do you get them to do that without just straight up punishing them? And they're like, okay, what about a fine? And then they just see the fine as a way to pay for the bad behavior instead of changing their behavior. And it's like human nature, the way that people want to resist change that is pushed upon them, that is something I think that also needs to be taken into account when trying to do these initiatives. So it's like you can't really force somebody to do something like wear a mask or recycle.
Yeah. We couldn't even get people to wear masks during a global pandemic.
Right. So when it comes to saving the planet, you can't give them the choice to continue destroying the planet if you're really trying to save the planet. Yeah. And that's where it's like, I don't know if ethanol is necessarily much better for the environment. But I'm sure it's slightly better enough where it's like, if everything that we were burning in America was ethanol versus like petrol-based gasoline, then I think that would at least do something. So if you're going to have people drive internal combustion and not give them the infrastructure for electric, the least we can do is take all this fucking corn and turn it into ethanol instead of like continuing to rely on the oil company. Because it's like, if ethanol production meant that we had to put all corn towards that instead of like putting it into Doritos, fine. We don't fucking need Doritos if that means saving the environment. I don't even think it would be like that.
Oh, it wouldn't. It's corn can be different grown. Kinds of corn, like fuel corn. Of course, corn isn't even like, they don't even feed that to animals.
Of course. So that's why I'm like, I don't even think it would remotely actually affect it so much as that would be the argument. That would be that's what Republicans say stupid shit like, oh, if you put up a wind farm, what's going to happen with the wind on windy days? the wind farms are going to take up all the wind, and so you're not dealing with like rational arguments. Like you have to actually come with the irrational response to deconstruct like
It actually turns
what
out that
people.
most of the corn grown in the United States is for feed and ethanol, and most of the corn that we get comes from Mexico.
Yeah, so but Americans don't fucking know that.
Well, no, I
Nobody
mean, if we get
nobody cares.
if I go to the farmer's market, I can guarantee that I'm getting some locally grown corn, but it's not a year long solution.
I mean, I don't know if farmers are gonna sell corn at the farmers market because it's not really like a very profitable um plant to grow at small
Oh
scale.
no, not at all.
So like if somebody's gonna be selling at a farmer's market, they're gonna sell some shit that they can like actually make some money on, like some fucking um tomatoes or some berries or something where you can charge more per pound. Cause fuck, why would anybody pay for like gourmet corn at the farmers, or I don't know what, like if
Indiana's
it's
not
the
even in the
best.
top in the list of the largest producers of food corn in the United States.
Oh, I wouldn't, I'm not surprised.
But I thought there
Um,
was more than corn in Indiana. I thought that Indiana was
because
supposed to be
again,
like
it's
the
probably it's
fucking corn
because of the
propaganda.
scale. All the Indiana and Ohio corn is probably going to ethanol and
Yeah,
feed,
yeah.
and so yeah, it's like that corn is probably why our beef is shitty
Ooh, yes.
because all the cows are eating this fucking
Yep.
corn instead of healthy food. So
In 2022, 43% of Indiana's corn crop was used to produce ethanol for more than 80% of vehicles on the road. It's the sixth largest producer of ethanol in the country and has 12 ethanol plants. It also produces animal feed. There are some corn food products in Indiana, but the vast majority are for corn plastics, corn fibers, materials, biofuels, animal feed, and ethanol at number one. We use the fibers to make carpets.
well, and all of the byproducts could be better replaced with hemp, whether it's protein or fucking fiber
Yeah.
or plastic. Like all that would be better replaced with hemp. So any corn does not like, yeah, it should all basically be going to ethanol, not feed, because the feed should be better. Like we should be giving our animals better shit if we're gonna eat the animals.
Yeah, hemp is a
Because
complete
then,
protein too.
yeah, we're still just eating fucking corn if it's corn fed cow or corn fed pig. So the way that our nutritional chain has been broken by corn, um, and everybody's basically getting corn via the meat and thinking that, oh, I'm going to get a burger. No, you're still eating corn. You're basically eating corn.
Corn burger.
Yeah, it might as well be because it's got the same fucking nutritional profile as some goddamn corn. And maybe they got a little bit of grass, maybe, but
Maybe.
probably not. It was probably all corn. So,
Maybe if they raised their own beef cow and only fed it grass.
oh, that definitely that. Yeah, that's where it's like
That's
if it's
expensive.
that's why it's expensive because they're not just shoveling corn into his fucking gullet. But if you get a burger from a place that doesn't explicitly say it's not corn fed, it's probably fucking corn fed. Like, or I mean, and like bad grains aren't going to be much better. Where if it's like filler or um if they're eating byproduct feed, it's probably just not gonna be nutritionally dense. And I think that's where like a lot of American food
The
is not.
WHO classifies corn corn-fed beef as a carcinogen. Oh no,
Man,
corned beef. Sorry.
there's so much of our food that's not legal elsewhere. Um, when you see the shit that's on our shelves that would just straight up be banned in many European countries, it's like I know a lot of the stuff tastes good, but when there's that element of like, oh fuck, I'm basically eating flavored cardboard, then it's a lot easier not to eat it. And this kind of
Oh
gets
wait,
back
no,
to
it
that.
does. It is. Red meat, like beef, is a group 2A carcinogen, meaning it's probably carcinogenic to humans.
Mhm. I mean, once you put a flame above 350 degrees Fahrenheit on anything, it becomes a carcinogen, like through the process of decarboxylation. So like grilling anything makes it carcinogenic, basically. Like fucking um that the black on anything from a grill is a carcinogen. Like when it's just what it is. So it's like the varying degrees of carcinogens range from like, you know, low level antioxidant to or low level oxidant to something that's gonna destroy your DNA. And the things that we ingest, some of them do end up becoming that like highest level carcinogen. And I think that's where it's like it's not necessarily going to be one thing. It's going to potentially be like a combination. If you eat like some ultra processed foods and then drink some soda that's full of corn syrup and then eat a bunch of nutritionally empty meat that is also then going to slow down your metabolism because of the oil, that concoction of like bad chemicals can then lead to like effects that the individual foods wouldn't have had on their own. And I think that's where you get these like weird, it's almost like zombie states of blood sugar in Americans where they're like so disconnected from the real world and zoned out, where it's like it's almost like some people just go from meal to meal and they might have to work in between meals, but on their mind, all they can think about is what they're going to eat next. And the next thing they're going to eat is not going to have a good nutrition profile. It's going to be something like sweets or something that's like over salted or something that's heavy on fat. And that type of constant movement
I'm not sure what
between
you just
like
described, but I'm sure that it tastes really good.
that's the entire point is like moving between those extremes is like all that person experiences is the bliss of the food highs and the lows of waiting to eat the next meal. And that's why they get so intensely focused on their next meal is because that person is basically getting high on food. And so when it becomes like the only thing a person gets high on, whether, you know, because I say get high, but I mean like get your endorphins and get your um,
Dopamine.
fucking serotonin and dopamine. If you get your natural high, you can move on and move to your like back to not getting your natural high, unless the swings are so intense that all that person does is go from endorphin, serotonin, dopamine drop to fucking recovery, back to drop, recovery. And that type of swing it's like those chemicals are what's driving whatever behavior is attached to them, but it's always going to be those chemicals that are attached to those types of like manic behaviors. And so Americans not being in control of their gut biome and having these massive behavioral swings in their food preferences, but only constantly being in this like, okay, I just ate, now I got to go back to work, but all I'm going to think about while I'm at work is the next thing I'm going to eat. I may not talk about it, but I'm just going to figure out what I'm going to eat next. And those types of like consumption focused mindsets prevent a person from thinking about other things. And that's where I feel like fasting doesn't just break me out of that food focus, because I like when you're fasting, it's like you almost just have to put it out of your mind anyway. And it's like, oh, I don't really have a choice because I'm not going to eat anything. You would think when you're fasting, like it becomes like only focused on food, when in reality, because the options taken off the table, it's like, then you don't think about it at all. And then when you're not thinking about food and are free to think about other things, then you're like, fuck, I can't imagine how much time I spend thinking about food if I don't pay attention. And then it becomes an issue of like actively not trying to spend time only thinking about food. So that's where I don't, there's levels of self-awareness, and when someone has time enough to start assessing the thoughts and be like, oh, I'm thinking about food too much, that person is dangerous to a system that depends upon mindless consumption. And I think that's partially why people's gut biomes are hijacked so constantly. Like there, it's like, what's the point of the corn conspiracy or the sugar conspiracy or the burger conspiracy or whatever, if there is an actual conspiracy to make people docile? What's the conspiracy? And ultimately, in a lot of these companies, I think just getting your consumer to continue consuming is enough of a conspiracy to make it seem like there's something even higher happening, when in reality, all these disparate companies just want people to keep coming back and using their shit. And the easiest way to do that is to inundate them with advertisements, or inundate them in a way to make them wear them down and make them unable to say no any longer. And I think that's like what's happening with the barrage of advertisement inundation. And I don't have to think about it often because I use ad blocks. But once I get out of my ad block bubble, then I realize how often other people have their thoughts broken by advertisements. And most people don't really get a chance to have unbroken thoughts. Like, do you know how many people would have interrupted me by that time because they can't allow an unbroken thought to even occur in their presence? It's like it sounds crazy, but I promise you, some people are so made uncomfortable by unbroken thoughts because they can't see them through to the end because they've never gotten the chance to do it for whatever reason. And this shit makes them uncomfortable, and they just have to like interject and cut somebody else off and bring up a totally different subject. Because like honestly, man, it's funny. Half the time I'm on a subject, I'll be like, oh fuck, he's not interrupting me, because he doesn't generally interrupt me. If you interrupted me, I don't think I ever would have started the podcast with you in the first place. But if I'm on a rant and then you don't interrupt me, there's sometimes I'm like, oh fuck, he didn't stop me like a regular person, so I can continue this to the end. Let me finish this thought.
Yeah,
And I
that's
have to
because I
like,
enjoy the way your brain works. Also, we've had 5+ years of extended conversations where we've allowed ourselves to explore ideas as far as we can, even sometimes running into roadblocks and then saying, "Oh wait, I better backtrack that idea." And I that happens to me quite a bit, and I enjoy that because that means I'm still learning things. I'm still exposed to ideas that are fresh that challenge me to reconsider things. And I'm pretty sure that's how I keep my brain young.
But that flexibility is it it necessitates one foot on facts and one foot open to new facts. And that's some place where people can't exist. Like some people can't exist in that. They either need both of their feet on facts, heavier quotes, or both of their feet are disconnected from the ground and they're the constant conspiracy theorists. And that's where I think it's a tightrope act, but that's also the reason I feel like people like Joe Rogan aren't willing to actually put their feet down on facts. He'll ask questions and pose questions, but he doesn't come down on facts because once you put one foot on a fact, then you're identified in a camp. And he'll come down on some facts. Like I think he finally acknowledged that the earth is not flat because his fucking ungrounded friend Eddie Bravo was such a conspiracy theorist that I think he finally had to be like, yeah, the earth is actually not flat, guys. That's something I'll have a spine enough to acknowledge. So I know there's some things that he'll come down on. It's the same shit with The Rock. The Rock does not come down on a side. And if he comes down on a side, somehow he comes down on both sides.
He just crushes
like,
the barriers
what?
between reality and conspiracy.
How did he just be pro and anti woke culture? What just happened? So like there are these people who The Rock is definitely charismatic, but it's only insofar that you don't know actually anything about what this man thinks about anything. So that's why his charisma exists at a surface level. And if it tries to go deeper than that, then it becomes this inconsistent, uncomfortable, fake hollowness where you can't then see it as charisma because then you realize, oh, he was just trying to make me happy. Like he just changed himself to make me happy. And then he just changed himself to make the other person happy. And then he did it again. And that's all he does.
But that's what
And
actors
then
do.
not in real life.
Oh no, I mean just like that's part of
But
what
he
the
does
act
that in
is.
real life. That's the
Okay. Yeah.
You're supposed to draw a line, and when you're an actor,
Well, when the
you're
camera's not
supposed to have
rolling.
when the camera's not rolling, you're supposed to be a real person, and you're not supposed to be an amalgamation of all the characters that you play. There's supposed to be something real that you're actually putting into the characters that you're playing, not the other way around. And so with The Rock, it felt like Dwayne Dwayne Johnson is in all of his characters. Dwayne Johnson doesn't have a spine. Dwayne Johnson doesn't have any strong opinions about anything. Dwayne Johnson just cares about getting paid. And so when you see those things in Dwayne Johnson, and then you see his Rock character, and then you see the acting roles he tries to play, and then you see when he tries to be a philanthropist, and then when you see when he tries to be an entrepreneur, it's like in all these things, all he can do is try to please people, and he doesn't really have any sort of strong convictions anywhere. And so I've been okay, let me be clear. I grew up watching The Rock wrestle as a fan when I'm a teenager. The problem is I've had now about 30 years of being inundated with media of this same person. And I still have no idea how this person feels about anything. And that's a huge problem. And this is why I raise it that way, is because I didn't just casually get introduced to The Rock. The Rock was like, if you're a black kid growing up in the 80s and 90s, The Rock became the closest thing you had to a real human being idol that was like a super hero, not really because they were wrestling and it was kayfabe, but in The Rock being able to be like a wrestling champion, he represented something to black youth that then you latched onto as just this, like, in the same way that I think just general kids want to be like Hulk Hogan, like, oh, I want to be this big gigantic dude who can like pick other people up and slam them, not because you want to hurt people, but because it's so awe-inspiring as like a physical feat, that this is what, like, the Undertaker walking on the top rope and then fucking dropping an elbow. It's not like nobody actually got hurt in the fake violence. Like, people definitely got hurt wrestling. That's not what the kids are seeing. The kids are seeing the same shit as a video game. It's like the kids are in on it. They know it's not real in the sense of like, if these people are really getting hurt, then they couldn't come out and do it multiple times a week. So there's this understanding of like playing along with the kayfabe to then have this person represent you. Like, it's no longer like just the Junkyard Dog and Coco Beware. Now you got The Rock, who's actually got a nation of domination and people behind him wearing fucking red, black, and green, throwing up the black power fist, coming out, kicking a bunch of ass. So this character represented something to these kids. Whether The Rock actually believed that or not, I don't know. His character did. So then to see him in real life not be able to have any convictions remotely close to this character he played when he first came on the scene, that's where I'm like, okay, that's where I have to start getting critical, because I thought you were about to be like Dr. Martin Luther King on steroids, like literally on steroids, because you came out and you looking like you're about to be Black Power fucking everything, and you're on steroids. So this is literally like, that would be the most scary thing to the white supremacist institution. Like, just imagine if Dr. Martin Luther King decided one day he's just going to start doing all the steroids and just get jacked out of his fucking mind to the point that his head starts growing, and suddenly his head's trying to keep up with the rest of his body's growth. And now all of a sudden, Dr. Martin Luther King is like 300 fucking pounds, looking like the juggernaut, and then talking about black people need to be respected. Of course, he was 5'9", 170. If that motherfucker was all roided out, of course they're gonna assassinate him. So the idea of like Dwayne Johnson basically rebel baiting us with this fake character of like black liberation rebellion. Obviously, kids don't know, like, oh, he's not actually going to go do that in real life. But the way he played it, I think at the time there was this notion that like black people were on our way to becoming more than like slaves and servants in media. And The Rock was like kind of him, Wesley Snipes, Denzel, I'll do the proper thing. His name is not pronounced Denzel, it's Denzel Washington. And obviously before that, Sidney Poitier and Nat King Cole. Like there's very few black actors that were able to be portrayed in ways that weren't slaves. So you got somebody like LeVar Burton. He's on both sides of the coin. He's like the most famous fucking slave of all time, but he's also the most famous black engineer in the future of all time. So it's like that I feel like you get people like him who are the full range of black experience. And I feel like we were getting to a point where it's not like you can't take slavery out of the black experience, but it was like nobody's gonna look at Dwayne Johnson and believe he was a slave. Like, so he can't play that role. So when you got people like him coming and becoming Arnold Schwarzenegger effectively, it changes the way black kids are going to start looking at themselves, the way they're going to start looking at other people, and the way they're going to start looking at black, like the place of black people in society. And it feels like Dwayne sold that out for money because other people who didn't sell that out didn't make nearly as much money. They may have not been poor, but they didn't make the hundreds of millions, almost $1 billion that he's made by basically being this fence sitting token black man. And I think that's where like OJ fucked himself over, obviously, but for many reasons. But OJ was on track to be what The Rock is. He just fucked it up. And like Tiger was on track to be, I guess technically, I don't know. It's weird with Tiger because I still think he's super rich, but he was like, his face was everywhere. He was in like Hertz commercials and Buick commercials and fucking Nike commercials.
Yeah.
He was everywhere.
He was on the money
up.
commercials, the big money commercials. You know, the funny thing about Tiger Woods is that his problems were that he just he was a philanderer, really. Golf wise, he's still a phenomenal golfer. Like, I don't watch golf at all anymore. I used to occasionally watch it, like visiting my grandparents in Kansas, but you know, I still know what to look for, and that guy is still impressive as can be.
Well, but yeah, it was always like you said, it was the philandering that got him out of mainstream, but that doesn't hurt other people unless that person is on track to be taken out of like mainstream popularity. It didn't hurt Hulk Hogan. If anything, it made him stronger.
Yeah.
Somehow.
Well, it validated his masculinity, his desirability factor.
And he made money off of it.
Yeah.
He made money off of the fact that it got found out. So it's like, I don't know how you fuck up like that and ended up making like $20 million from it. But that's the deal when you're all about money, like that would seem like it's a benefit when in reality it's like I can't imagine his family life ever being okay ever again. There's no way. Like he sold out the possibility of ever having an okay family life by doing, you know, having the tape that got leaked on BuzzFeed, but then also suing BuzzFeed and winning a case when you're the one doing the wrong. That's some like cosmic karma where it's like, oh, we don't see the repercussions, but there's definitely repercussions. Whether it's just the fact that his home life's never the same, or I don't know, you know, whatever it is. Like you don't get that and not eventually get the other side. Fortunately, karma's real.
Man, I don't really think about Hulk Hogan that much anymore.
He's bro, he
It
he's doing the Christian grift now. He's been on the 700 Club. He's selling Hulk Hogan John 316 t-shirts for
wasn't that
like I think
Steve
they're like
Austin's thing,
$30.
the 316 thing.
It wasn't actually referencing the scripture. Austin 316 is an adaptation of the scripture where it was like know your role and shut your mouth or something. And so Austin 316 had a saying, this motherfucker is just straight up selling t-shirts with John 316 on the front. It just says John 316, and then on the sleeve it says Hulk Hogan. Like, I don't know if the back has the actual scripture. I don't think the back has the actual scripture. But it's just like he's this weird.
Hulk Hogan is born
obviously
again.
Grifting. Yes, he's obviously Christian grifting, but he's not doing it well enough where you can't break one of the commandments while you're trying to grift Christians. Like, you can't sit up there and tell a bunch of lies while you're trying to then collect money from these people and not have some crazy cosmic karma. Like, I don't believe in the Christian God. Like, I don't believe in any specific God. Like, I don't think there's any sentient thing just sitting there like counting like, oh, this person fucked up. And I said explicitly not to do this thing. But I know that if you're a person who's like pretending to be a certain religion and exploiting people doing that, you're just basically building up this, let's call it a reservoir of negative energy. Like, that's all it has to be. This person, like, it may feel like they're winning because they're getting the money and then they're buying yachts and they're buying mansions, but this is all shit that's built off of exploitation that eventually wells over and spills out and affects the person that does it. Like, you can't exploit and you can't exploit and exploit and exploit and never have any repercussions come back on your bloodline, because it may not be you, it may not be your kid, it may not be your grandkid, but the shit is gonna happen. It's gonna come back to your fucking bloodline, because that's how chaos
that's like
and order
human nature
works.
in a lot of ways.
It's not even just human nature. That's how chaos and order works. Like, chaos is eventually replaced by order, and order is eventually replaced by chaos. And you can't have order in your place and cause chaos in a bunch of other places and never have that chaos come back. And I think that's a rule people think that they can, like,
Escape somehow.
yeah, like, have you seen Full Metal Alchemist?
Yes.
That's what that entire thing is about, the law of equivalent exchange, in that it obviously is a more I guess it's not the way they present it is a more concrete representation of that abstract concept of, like, nothing is created or destroyed, it just changes form. And so when you're talking about somebody being exploited, that's negative. Like, it don't matter if that person knows that they're being exploited, there's some negative shit happening there. And it's like, you can't just keep putting energy into that negative well without it eventually filling up and starting to spill out. And I think that's where it's like, people, like I said, people think that they can control these, like, physical laws and these ethereal laws that we're still obviously humans will never know what the laws are, but we exist within their confines. And that's I think that's why there's this weird desire to try to figure out like what are the universal laws that govern us at an atomic level, but also the ends of the known universe, and trying to figure out what those specific universal laws are. It's like it's in our DNA. Well, in some of our DNA, and I think in some people, whether it's been blocked off or it was never innate, I don't know, but that's where knowing some people pursue that where others just actively ignore it. That to me is like I feel like that is the ultimate struggle of humanity is like knowing that I don't know what percentage of us, but some of us aren't going to try to connect with the greater universal laws. And whether you want to call him a god or whatever, I we shouldn't have to come to agreement on what those universal laws are if everybody's in good faith pursuit of their own understanding, because they may not be the same for individuals anyway. But seeing like I think there has to be a certain level of luxury to start thinking about that shit in the first place, which is where I'm like, it feels like a lot of humans are prevented from connecting to that greater universal law because they're actively being distracted with these cycles of consumption. And that's where it like
How are
I,
people even able to have their own thoughts if they're constantly inundated by breaking news and this just in and news at 11 and daily wrap-ups and morning reports and this is what the latest pop culture thing is and this is what's going on whatever that website that's about to get banned and from more information from the website that's name got changed to a letter that we have to type all the time now. Like there's no time to have individualized thoughts, let alone like developing the a foundation for thinking for oneself if it's just keeping up with the information cycle. And I think there's a lot of FOMO going on because someone's at work and they might not be able to constantly check the internet so they can stay abreast of whatever pop culture is I don't know, foisting on everyone. I'm acting like pop culture is this organism that's manifesting in the internet because that's what it feels like sometimes. It's this thing you got to watch. If you don't watch it, it might change and you won't be able to recognize it.
oh, I think you nailed on something. There's a cultural zeitgeist that we're all part of, and we all observe, and we all also feel like we're not part of simultaneously. So it's like it's weird to know where the zeitgeist ends and where our individuality begins. And when we're contributing to that zeitgeist, does our individuality then become part of it, or is it just reflected? And I think that's like a hard line for people to draw, which is also where I think the addiction to likes and retweets and things like that and interaction are becoming a problem too.
Yeah, the what should we call it? The closed loop of dopamine that we get from I don't even know. I'm not on Facebook like that, so I don't post things. I don't feel like I don't get that kind of satisfaction from the internet anymore. I don't want to post things to the internet. I don't feel like my few keystrokes as a comment on someone else's article or post or whatever is even the actual intent. Because if somebody wants to interact, then they'll say that generally. Maybe I'm not using social media the right way, but also maybe I don't have the interest in using it like that. I don't know. Is actually what I'm coming to realize. Is I just don't know what's going on in social media because, for whatever reason, I don't have that desire to engage the internet like that anymore. I've got more interesting things to do. I've got things to think about. I've got people that I actually know that I've been maintaining long conversations with for years now that I would much rather talk to than some stranger on the internet about something that's just like barely qualifies as banter at a party.
I haven't been on Facebook in so long.
I don't think you're missing anything, but I only follow like the same 6 people. So I'm definitely not getting the whole story.
Well, but that's like, okay.
But
The
I don't think
people,
I'm missing out. That's the other thing. I'm not missing anything either.
I feel like the people that I talk to in our Discord chat, I feel like I have more actual social bond with those people than any conversations I've really had on Facebook. Because I know it's like a continuous conversation and it's not like just the post of the day. And I don't know, like if somebody just makes a post, I don't know if they carry what happened on that post into the next day. Whereas the way the Discord works, it's like because it doesn't really cut off, the conversation never really ends. And so it's almost like you almost, if somebody's like, remember that thing we were talking about? Like, yeah, of course, because we can just scroll up.
You know, it's
Whereas,
actually I'm glad you mentioned that because I see the Discord as a long endless conversation as you've just described, but there are times when I use it just as like I just saw this thing that's ridiculously funny and I'm going to share this with like the Discord group because I think this is like something that they need to see too. And I don't actually expect a response.
but it doesn't get replaced by something. So we may not see it for a day, but we're gonna see it eventually because something's not gonna replace it in the feed.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's true.
And I think that that's something fundamentally different I've noticed about those conversations. It's like you can build friendships on Twitter and Facebook, but with like Discord is not just the platform, it's the type of conversation. I think the same thing happens over text message,
Yeah.
where it's like it has to take a more long form and you commit it more to memory because it's not being constantly replaced by something else. And this is like getting back to that notion of the advertising hijacking conversation and people's thoughts.
Man, it almost sounds like we're standing Discord, and we kind of are. But really, Discord it represents to me like the best aspects of social media and traditional forum interaction. It hasn't once made me think, oh, I need to find a different platform to chat with people on. Like every other social media platform, that have always ended up ruining it because too many ads or too much weird shit. Random people showing up and having an opinion when it's like, man, I thought I set this thing to like friends only. Which is like the thing that I thought was supposed to make Facebook or social media different from a forum. But it turns out it's not. It's just a forum with a really fancy skin. And not even a good forum with a really fancy skin.
Exceptional Radio. Exceptional Randos shows produced live in Sunroom Studios' Base Capsule. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.